Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Initiative 65 medical cannabis legalization event for Mississippi. My name is Jay Czarkowski. I'm the founding partner of Canna Advisors in Boulder, Colorado. The majority of the work that my firm does is helping win competitive medical cannabis licenses in various states. So people have asked me, why are you giving so much support to this program in Mississippi? Because it's going to be more of an open program that's not necessarily competitive. An open program is good. It provides for competition, which provides for better products for patients. It provides for better product pricing for patients. So why am I here? Because it's the right thing to do. I've often said, if I expect to have business opportunities in this industry, I need to do my part to help build it. So that's why I'm here today, to help build it. In my opinion, through my efforts today, if I could help legalize medical cannabis in Mississippi, and through that, one sick person or one terminally ill patient could find relief or a cure, then I've done a good thing today. So that's why I'm here. Without further ado, let me kick it over to Brian Vicente of the Vicente Sederberg Law Firm to take this forward.
Thanks, Jay. Hi, everyone. Brian Vicente here. Welcome to our discussion on the Mississippi medical marijuana law, which will be voted on in just about 49 days or so, very soon. We are thrilled to be here talking to you guys about this. I will be moderating today, and I'm going to introduce our panelists, which are just of the highest caliber. We could not ask for a better group to talk to us about this initiative that's moving forward. We're going to take a deep dive on the law. We're going to talk a bit about some of the policy ramifications and how it's going to be good for the state. We're going to let you know how you can help, and we're going to take questions. And we're going to do all that in about 40 minutes. So everyone's busy out there. We really appreciate your time taking a few minutes to look at Mississippi. So this moment in time is an amazing moment in time to be involved in medical marijuana policy. We have 33 states with medical marijuana laws, only 2 on the ballot, Mississippi and South Dakota, right? And if you look at the 33 states, there's not a lot in the South. So the significance of winning in a place like Mississippi, not only to help patients, which is of course the most important thing, but also to send a message that medical cannabis is valid for patients. It's valid in the South the same way it is on the West Coast or the Northeast. And really to give Mississippi a shot at being a real leader on this healthcare policy in that region and potentially an economic engine for the state during these tough COVID times. So thrilled to be here. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel quickly, and then we're going to do a quick overview of the law, and then I'll hit the panel with a couple questions that outline some of the bigger issues going on. So we have Representative Joel Bomgar here. He is the absolute main proponent of this campaign. He's done such a great job driving it forward. He was originally with Bomgar Industries, which was where he's essentially one of the largest job producers for the state of Mississippi, hands down. He served as an elected state representative for a number of years. He also serves as the vice chair of the drug policy committee within the Mississippi legislature. A lot of other things I could say about him, but I did research a little bit of fun fact. And the fun fact about Representative Bomgar is he loves building zip lines, and he's built a significant zip line structure in his backyard. So I'm going to turn things over to Joel in a minute. Our other 2 panelists, I'm thrilled to have my good friend Matthew Schweich. I've worked with for years. He's the deputy director of the Marijuana Policy Project, which really has been responsible for changing the bulk of the medical cannabis laws around the nation for its 20-plus year existence. So Matt is an absolute authority on these topics. My fun fact on Matt is that he built 3 igloos while in college. So there you go. I don't know what that fun fact means, but he did it. And finally, we have Jamie Grantham. She is the communications director for the Initiative 65 campaign. So she has a long history in communications, has worked in a number of prestigious institutions in Mississippi, both religious and secular. And so we're thrilled to have her on board. Fun fact, giant fan of the Dallas Cowboys. So there we go. We've personified them and humanized them. We're going to turn it over to our experts. So I want to hear from Representative Bomgar first. Can you just give us 3-4 minutes with the basics of this campaign and what Mississippi's looking at in just under 50 days?
Yeah, absolutely. So 49 days to go. And I've got a few short PowerPoint slides if we can go ahead and bring those up. And again, I'm State Representative Joel Bomgar. I serve in the Mississippi House of Representatives, and I've served for the last 5 years, and I'm on my second term. So medical marijuana 2020, you should be able to see the slides. What is it? Well, there's our presenters. Next slide. It is a ballot initiative. So medical marijuana 2020 is a ballot initiative process to make medical marijuana available to Mississippians through Initiative 65. It got on the ballot because we collected more than 228,000 signatures from around the state. And that will result in a robust medical marijuana program for the state of Mississippi. Our program has 22 named conditions, including any other medical condition of the same kind or class. So the goal was to make sure that anybody that could benefit from medical marijuana would have it available to them via a consultation with their doctor. And anyway, so it will help tens of thousands of patients here in the state of Mississippi. We have a gigantic steering committee of more than 70 leaders from around the state that have signed on to the steering committee for medical marijuana 2020 Initiative 65, and proud to be supported by so many across the spectrum. The sort of not fun fact about Initiative 65 was that after Initiative 65 officially qualified, the Mississippi legislature, which is my colleagues, over top of my strong opposition, put a competing measure for medical marijuana on the ballot called Alternative 65A. So you have two things on the ballot, just very similar to in Missouri in 2018. You had more than one medical marijuana initiative on the ballot. The same thing is happening here in Mississippi. We have two initiatives on the ballot, Initiative 65 and Alternative 65A. Now, Alternative 65A is not a real medical marijuana program. The legislature put it on the ballot because they did not want to deal with medical marijuana, and it was an attempt to split the vote and try to kill Initiative 65. That was the stated purpose of placing it on the ballot. And you can tell that by a few highlights from it. One, in Alternative 65A, there is no start date. There is no mandate. There's no start date. It's not clear when, if ever, a medical marijuana program would result from the alternative. In our initiative, it will be up and running by August of 2021. In the alternative, there are no legal protections for patients, caregivers, or doctors. They have no list of named conditions. There's no framework for how the program will function. There's no laying out of rules and regulations. And of course, it was put there by politicians who are intent on killing medical marijuana in Mississippi. Now, the one thing that they keep talking about is that the word medical marijuana should not be in the Constitution, but their alternative actually does put the word medical marijuana in the Constitution, just like Initiative 65. It just doesn't do anything other than wishful thinking. So it's a diversion and a distraction. And our message with the campaign is that only one thing will result in a real medical marijuana program in the state of Mississippi, and that is Initiative 65, which was put on the ballot by 228,000 Mississippians and will result in a real medical marijuana program that actually benefits real people. A few other highlights, the actual ballot. The ballot, you have to vote for Initiative 65 on the bottom part, and at the top, you have to vote to amend the Constitution. So effectively, it's a two-step process. The first vote is to amend the Constitution to allow a medical marijuana program at all. And then the second part of the ballot is which program will you adopt, a real medical marijuana program, which is Initiative 65, or the legislative alternative, which will accomplish nothing. As far as what the polling looks like, we have polling from earlier this year, shortly after the legislature put the alternative on the ballot, and it looks really strong. So on the first part of the ballot, we need at least 50% of the vote in order to pass, and we are right at 75% of Mississippians who are ready to amend the state constitution for medical marijuana, including 56% who say they will definitely vote yes on medical marijuana on the ballot on November 3rd, just 49 days from now. And then on the second part of the ballot, when you ask them which do they prefer, 65 or 65A, in order to win on that part of the ballot, you have to get a minimum of 40% of the vote. And right now we are leading by a more than 2-to-1 margin, up at 52% of the vote. So obviously the people that are in the don't know category, We'll have to sort between those two, but we are in a very strong position to win on the ballot no matter what. So we're leading by more than a 2-to-1 margin over the legislative alternative. And when you ask people why, they say, because I don't think the alternative is a real medical marijuana program. If the legislature intended to pass a real medical marijuana program, they've had 20 different bills to do that in the last decade. They've never even had a hearing or a vote on any of them. And essentially, the whole thing is disingenuous. The people of Mississippi realize that the Mississippi legislature does not intend to actually create a real medical marijuana program, and that the alternative on the ballot is there as a diversion, not a real thing. So we're in a strong position, but we have a lot of people to educate. About 1.2 million Mississippians will show up to vote just 49 days from now. So we need financial resources to make sure they know what's on the ballot and how to vote to result in a real medical marijuana program. Now, polling has been surprisingly accurate over time. If you look at the middle of this, for example, Missouri Amendment 2 was polling right at 65% and came in on the ballot at 66%. And most other campaigns, the polling has been within a couple percentage points, or at most 5 percentage points down in Utah, or 4 percentage points in Arkansas. So we're feeling really good about it. And but again, we have to do the hard work of getting the word out over the next 49 days to guarantee a win here in Mississippi. So the conclusion of the polling is that Mississippians are ready to approve medical marijuana in 2020, with more than 3/4 of Mississippians favoring medical marijuana, and that support is across all demographic groups, all geographic groups, and everything. And so our request of you would be that you join us in easing the suffering of those with debilitating medical conditions here in Mississippi. Politicians stand in their way, other hurdles stand in their way, but now is the time to bring much needed relief to Mississippians, to veterans, to cancer patients, to people with epilepsy, and so much else. So anyway, that's what we would ask, that you would join us in this crusade for truth and justice, to bring much needed medicine and care to those who need it most. So with that, Brian, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Joel. And looks like Matt's joined too. So let's dive in a little bit here, and if people could go on mute when they're not speaking. Thank you for that summary, Joel. You spoke about the needs of those who are sort of debilitatingly ill in Mississippi. I started my career about 15, 20 years ago representing people dying of AIDS and cancer that were using medical marijuana, getting thrown in jail. So I got to say, there's nothing like, looking in the eyes of a patient, seeing, letting them know when they say this matters to them, it really galvanizes and strengthens you. I'm curious for Jamie and Joel. I mean, you're boots on the ground. You've been running this campaign. Have you run into people that need this medicine? Are there stories that have stuck with you? Why do you get out of bed and fight for this? Can you address that a little bit, please?
Yeah, I'll speak and then I'll turn it to Jamie. So part of what, part of where the passion of myself is driven by is I lost both of my parents to cancer. Both of my parents passed away from cancer. My parents died in a lot of pain. And even with the best opioids and other painkillers in the world, my parents, I believe, died in a lot more pain and a lot more nausea than was necessary. And the reason, because we live in Mississippi. And medical marijuana is available almost everywhere else around the country, but not here. And people like my parents are still dying today in Mississippi. And to me, that's just unconscionable. Why would we let people suffer unnecessarily because we don't allow them to use a plant that God made, like every other plant on this earth, and it provides relief for those who are suffering. So for me, it's more personal. And Jamie, do you want to speak to some of the stories you've heard around the state?
Sure, and I hope my connection is okay. Just flag me if it's not. But yeah, it's for me. I believe, like Joel said, I'm a Christian, and I believe that the Lord created the plants and called them good, and told us to responsibly subdue the earth. And when I've been with this campaign for about 2.5 years now, and I've heard hundreds of stories from Mississippians who are desperate for another option because pharmaceutical medications are just not meeting their needs. They're not alleviating the pain. They're not stopping the seizures. And hearing from so many patients in other states across the country, the way that really this miracle plant is providing a better quality of life. And in some cases, life in general. Some of these patients wouldn't be here without it. That to me is something to fight for here in Mississippi, because Mississippians deserve to have that very same access. There's a story of a little girl I spent time with recently. She's from North Mississippi. Her family's from North Mississippi. She's 8 years old, and she was having seizures from the time she was born until about 4 years old. At about 4 years old, she started having grand mal seizures. She was having up to about 100 a day. So her little body wasn't even able to recover before the next one started. And part of that was because she was only born with 40% of her brain. So it was even more difficult for her body to recover from those. And so they tried every pharmaceutical medication out there. And the doctors eventually just said, there's really nothing else we can do for you. And they sent them home to basically bury their daughter when that would happen. And they are medical refugees. They, within 2 weeks, packed up everything, moved to a state with a regulated medical marijuana program. And that little girl has not had one seizure in almost 3 years. She is alive, first of all. And second of all, not one seizure in the 3 years that they've been in this other state. So for reasons like that, it's for patients who, like Joel said, with cancer, and these other very serious conditions, there is zero reason why patients should not have the ability to talk with their doctors and have this as an option to make the decision with their doctors if they feel like it would be best for them.
Jamie and Joel, thank you so much for sharing those stories. Very powerful stuff. I want to hear from Matt, that so much of the effectiveness of medical cannabis laws relies on the number of patient conditions that a doctor could recommend for. So Matt, are you familiar with that? It looks like a pretty long list to me when Joel kind of flipped through those slides, but do you feel like if this law passes, it will help a lot of people, or is it more of a narrowly restricted law? Can you speak to that, please?
Sure. I think it's an excellent set of qualifying conditions, a thoughtful set of qualifying conditions that's going to help so many people in Mississippi. Just to kind of tack on to what Joel and Jamie said, this is just a question of right and wrong. I do a lot of full legalization campaigns, and there's a debate to be had there, right? With medical, there isn't a debate. It's a question of compassion. To force parents of a child with epilepsy to choose between being criminals and stopping their child's seizures, that alone is a reason to pass this initiative. And there's so many other ways, so many other experiences that require it. I have a close family member with epilepsy. I grew up watching my sibling have seizures endlessly, and we were lucky. We found the pharmaceutical that stopped his seizures. But there's so many families out there, they go through every pharmaceutical and they can't find something that stops the seizures. And then they find cannabis and it stops them. And the idea that the law would tell those parents they're a criminal, it's not just wrong in the way that prohibition is wrong or that arresting people is wrong. It's really, really awful. And to your point earlier, Brian, not every state allows for a ballot initiative, right? 24 states allow for a citizens initiative to place an initiative on the ballot. And if you look at the map of the country, it's mostly out west. And Mississippi is somewhat of an island in terms of ballot initiatives. That's why this campaign is so crucial. This is not just another medical marijuana campaign. This is a crucially important medical marijuana campaign in a region where we need a win. And if we win in Mississippi, it's going to place pressure on all the neighboring states to get their act together. So this is bigger than usual. This isn't just this isn't just the 34th. This is the 34th plus maybe 3 more, plus maybe 4 more. Every state has different regional impact. And for me, this is one that has huge regional impact. But I diverted, but yes, I believe that the list of qualifying conditions is thoughtful, comprehensive, and it's going to help so many people in Mississippi.
Thank you, Matt. Let's stay on the sort of medical patient focus for a minute. I was reading recently, and maybe Joel can speak to this, and I'd love the other panelists as well, that Mississippi has one of the highest, I think it's opiate addiction rates in the country. And we've seen, and maybe Matt can speak to this in a minute, but I want to hear Joel's thoughts on what's going on the ground and how this may help people in Mississippi. But we've seen that when medical cannabis laws passed, that there's a a positive relationship to there being less opiate issues. I'm going to kind of tee that up a little bit for Joel, and then maybe Matt could jump in with some of the data or what we've seen when these laws pass. So, Joel. Joel, you're muted, my friend.
Thank you, as always. Prior to launching the medical marijuana campaign here in Mississippi, I spent a huge amount of time working on the opioid epidemic. I was the guy introducing bills on the opioid epidemic. I did a ton of research. Me and my executive assistant can tell, the CDC Wonder database inside and out on the data of, opioid, related deaths and all of that. And ultimately, the conclusion I came through from years of researching between 2016 and 2018, the opioid epidemic, is that if you don't give people options, they all end up on opioids. And in a state like Mississippi, where we do not have medical marijuana as an option, it has landed us as one of the fourth highest prescribers of opioids in the country. There's only 50 states, and we are one of the top 5 opioid prescribing states in the country. And we have, a lot of issues, a lot of people on disability, a lot of people on opioids. And so one of the things that I heard consistently from doctors, in the course of the last 4 or 5 years, is they said, look, everybody's telling us to prescribe less opioids, but they're not giving us an alternative. And you can't just leave a patient in pain, right? They're going to get their opioids somewhere. And you don't want them getting their opioids somewhere where that may hurt them. And so it kept coming back to medical marijuana was the single biggest thing we could do in the state of Mississippi to bring down the death rate from the opioid epidemic. Nothing else we could do legislatively would come close to allowing an alternative. You've got to allow an alternative. Medical marijuana is that alternative. And I tried for years to get my legislative colleagues in 2016, 2017, 2018, et cetera, to pass a medical marijuana bill so we could do something about the opioid epidemic. And ultimately, after being told no over and over and over, my legislative colleagues told me, hey, we have a ballot initiative process in Mississippi. And after they kept telling me, if you want medical marijuana in Mississippi, you should put it on the ballot. Well, guess what? It's on the ballot. So here we go. But yeah, I think not only will it alleviate pain and suffering for a huge number of people, it is the number one thing we could do to bring down the opioid epidemic, and a very concrete thing we could do to stop losing population to other states who are just sick of being in a place where the government is in the middle of a doctor-patient relationship. And we have supermajority control, Republican control in our legislative body, the House, the Senate, and the governor's mansion. And the government is still in the middle of that doctor-patient relationship when it comes to medical marijuana. And I don't think it should be. And Initiative 65 will fix that problem.
Thank you, Joel. Matt or Jamie, did you want to weigh in on that? Matt, in particular, do you have any thoughts on substitution effect or what we see when these laws pass?
Yes, I hear about this in every state, and again, it's an instance of forcing a ridiculous decision on a human being. Somebody's in chronic pain, they can't manage their pain, they go to a doctor, they're prescribed opioids that are A, very addictive, and B, potentially lethal. You put enough opioids in your body, you die. We know that tragically far too well in this country. And to say that this person who's been prescribed opioids shouldn't have the legal ability to choose an alternative that is far less addictive and habit forming, and more importantly, you cannot kill yourself with if you misuse it. This is basic common sense. This is basic right and wrong. And I see this in every state. There have been studies looking at the opioid overdose rate, and one particular study found a significant drop, over 20% after medical marijuana laws are passed. That data comports with what you would expect in the real world. Again, common sense, not forcing terrible decisions on people who shouldn't have to make those choices.
You know what else is an interesting byproduct, Brian? I remember from some of the early days of medical cannabis legalization in Colorado is that teen use dropped off. I remember my own teenagers at the time when they became aware of cannabis, aware of medical marijuana. Their view on marijuana was it was something that their grandmother used for her back pain. So I think there's probably a long list of positives that could come from this.
Especially as we think about veterans, we pride ourselves as a country that takes care of its veterans. Why are we pushing veterans with chronic pain towards highly addictive, potentially lethal drugs? Is that taking care of our veterans? Is putting handcuffs on them when they choose a safer option? Is that taking care of our veterans? Is that patriotic? I don't think so at all.
Looking at the polls, it's obvious that the majority of the people of Mississippi are in favor of a responsible, regulated medical cannabis program, and it's somewhat shocking to learn that the elected officials it would appear, are attempting to derail this. And Brian, you're on mute.
Brian, you're on mute. Yep.
Sorry. The sticky mute button. I have one more question for the panel, and then I want to turn things over to some audience Q&A. I know there's people that have questions. I think it's clear why Joel and Jamie are behind this. It's really about patience. But I did want to think about a different policy issue, and that's, the current economic crisis that our country is in. Mississippi has long been, historically low-income state. Now we have COVID, which is crippling all sorts of state economies. Thoughts from Matt or others about, potential economic opportunity that could come out of establishing this new industry in the state?
Matt, I think you're on mute.
Everybody's got their mute issues. I was reading with interest about the announcement of the ballot initiative on the new flag of Mississippi, and the Chief Justice of the Mississippi Supreme Court, who chaired that commission, he said something interesting. He said something, we're always last. Maybe this is our chance to move forward and not be last in things. And I thought it was a powerful quote, and I see this as similar. Moving ahead with medical marijuana, that's a way for Mississippi to move up. Mississippians are proud people. Their state has challenges. This initiative is really a way to move forward. And in terms of the economic impact, we know that hundreds of thousands of jobs have been created by the marijuana industry broadly in this country. I think the last count was 211,000 jobs, but that's just the jobs that are directly created. If we pass this initiative in Mississippi, yes, there are going to be jobs created in the dispensaries, in the testing facilities that ensure the medicine is safe and consistent, in the cultivation facilities that grow marijuana, in the product manufacturing businesses that take marijuana and turn it into different products that work best for patients. So there's all those jobs, there's all that economic impact. But there's more than that. There's the multiplier effect. There's a new source of revenue, new opportunities for existing businesses in Mississippi, whether it's a construction firm that's been around for 50 years, or a young entrepreneur who just started an HVAC firm, or a real estate company, or a compliance firm, or security firm. All these existing businesses that are in Mississippi that are hurting right now, because we're all hurting in every state on the economy. We pass this initiative, we help patients first and foremost. That's the number one purpose. But yeah, we're going to create jobs in the medical marijuana industry in Mississippi. But on top of that, new opportunities, new possibilities for expansion for Mississippi's existing small businesses. And that's something that sometimes gets lost. This is good for people that have already been in business for many, many years in Mississippi. You're going to have new chances to expand, new projects to take on, and it's going to have a really positive impact at a time when every state needs this type of positive impact on their state economy.
Thank you, Matt. If any other panelists have a comment on that, or I can shift to the next part of our presentation here. So we have about 10 minutes left. We're going to open it up for Q&A, but Jay Czarkowski, who's on the panel here, has a quick important announcement, and then we'll jump right into kind of Q&A from the participants and the audience.
Brian, it's funny. I was listening to Joel and Jamie tell some of these stories. I was, thinking about how long you and I have been working together to help states pass responsible medical cannabis bills. And I don't know, maybe I've become complacent a little bit over the last couple of years because, so many places, are on the right track. And clearly, after listening to Joel and Jamie, there's still work to be done. So I hope we can help make it happen. I always talk about how important it is to help build the industry. So I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. It announced that my company, Canna Advisors, and Brian's law firm, the Vicente Sederberg law firm, we're going to commit matching donations today of up to $5,000. We will match any and all donations up to a total of $5,000 today. So I think through the web browser here, it's possible for folks to write in and make those pledges. We'll acknowledge those as they come in. So please dig deep. It's important. I've been involved in so many state medical campaigns. I could tell you it really feels good to be on the right side of a battle, and it really feels good to win. And this looks like a winning situation, but clearly there's opposition. There's people working against really the patients of Mississippi. We need to help those people make this happen. So let's get it done.
Thank you, Jay. And it's really our honor to be supporting this campaign. I can't tell you how impressed I am by the work that Joel and Jamie have done. And, you know, if it takes a couple dollars from each of our pockets to get this across the end line to help the patients and our colleagues in Mississippi, then I hope people can dig deep. I know it's a hard time. So we are going to sort of open things up to questions. I might need my colleague Jen to assist me with knowing where these questions appear in the chat. But I do have sort of one question, which has percolated up so far here, which is, Joel, you know, once again, that this is an abnormal situation where you have competing ballot measures. Can you sort of reinforce the right thing to do on the ballot here, and you know, how people can tell their friends, you know, this is how you vote in Mississippi?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so it's super simple. There's two parts of the ballot. One, do you want to amend the state constitution to allow medical marijuana? Yes or no. And the way that's worded is you're voting in favor of either or against both. So it's very simple. First part of the ballot, vote yes on medical marijuana. And then the second part of the ballot, it's going to say, which one? Do you want Initiative 65, which is nice and clean? It's the first one, top of the ballot. In fact, the yes is above the no as well. So simple would be vote the top option. That top option is yes for medical marijuana to amend the Constitution, and the top option between the two is yes for Initiative 65, not Alternative 65A that shows up below it, as it should be, because there's nothing to it. So, all right. So, yeah, go ahead. Good question, though.
Sure. I just
one thing, Brian, real quick. I just want everybody watching to know this is a really well-run campaign. I've been doing this for 5 years. I've worked on campaigns in Maine, Massachusetts, Nevada, Arizona, Michigan, Utah, North Dakota, South Dakota, Idaho, Oklahoma, Missouri. I've been involved in a lot of them. I've seen a lot of different groups do a lot of different things. This is legitimately one of the best medical marijuana campaigns I've ever seen. You saw that slide with the steering committee. It's unbelievable. So this isn't you donating to just some random group in Mississippi. This is a highly organized, highly effective campaign. One of the best medical marijuana ballot issue campaigns I've seen.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that.
Thanks, guys. And I finally figured out the technology. So let me give you some live action updates. We have a number of donations coming in. I'm thinking the viewers can see these, but I wanted to thank Jessica for $50, Kate for another $50, Lisa Jordan, a friend of ours, for $100, Jessica Lyon, $25. This is amazing. We're also getting some really great questions. I see one from former state representative Sal Pace. Should the Mississippi program be a profitable market if 65 passes based on the ballot language? So I think he's speaking about the economics thereof.
Yeah. Let me speak to that. A couple things I should have brought up earlier, but some people have asked the mechanics of the medical marijuana initiative in Mississippi. So first of all, 4 highlights on that. There are no license caps. So, you know, the highest quality providers will bubble to the top in a open, free, and fair market. And obviously, there will be minimum requirements to participate in that market, but there's no hard cap on licenses. So that should eliminate lawsuits and all of the fighting and bickering that come back and forth about who gets to do what. So it's an open license. It's a no cap license system. Vertical integration is allowed, but not required. So there's flexibility with regard to that. And then last of all, there's a guaranteed timeline for implementation. So unlike the legislative alternative, and just fun fact, in case you're interested in a fun fact, the last time that the Mississippi legislature allowed something by ballot initiative, it took the legislature, I believe, 28 years to finally implement it. So in this case, we're not waiting 28 years. With Initiative 65, it will pass on the November 3rd ballot, just 49 days from today. The Department of Health has until July 1st to adopt final rules and regulations, and they must issue licenses and identification cards by August 15. So there is a very specific timeline that we will have a fully functioning, up and running program, fully on board, serving patients in 2021, period. This is not, on an 18 or 28 year time delay or some bizarre, something that legislators think is fast enough, but hurts a lot of people. So this is really going to help a lot of people, and it's very concrete. And to Sal's question, it is a functional, market that will serve patients just like the best markets that serve patients.
Excellent. I really appreciate that, Joel. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of the timeline that the team, Joel and Jamie, have built into this law. Patients need medicine soon, and they've created a system to get them medicine soon. It's really very thoughtful. I did want to acknowledge John Payne came in for $250. Again, every dollar is being matched up to $5,000 by Jay Czarkowski and also the Vicente Sederberg law firm. So a couple other interesting questions, a lot of interesting questions coming in, but a couple of these have to do with residency, right? So one question, can out-of-state individuals, if they're a sick person in Louisiana or something, will they have access to this program? The second question, I don't know if you know this, the answer to this one, not yet, or Joel and Jamie, is ownership requirements. If I want to own a business in Mississippi, do I need to be a resident? How does that work?
Yeah, good question. So with the ballot initiative, unlike some other campaigns, such as Utah, for example, where it's a statutory campaign, in the case of Mississippi, it's only a constitutional amendment. So if you want to change something that the legislature is not dealing with in Mississippi, your only option is a constitutional amendment. So we separated with Initiative 65 the elements that needed to be in the Constitution, because if they were not in the Constitution, the program could be shut down or disabled or take 28 years to roll out or whatever it was. All of those are hard-coded in the Constitution. Things like, residency requirements or for ownership of a license or otherwise, all of that we left to the rules and regulations of the Department of Health. Now, it is very clear in the initiative lays out in detail the process by which the Department of Health will promulgate rules and regulations. And it is very clear that they have to promulgate reasonable rules and regulations. So for some of those things, we didn't want to get into residency requirements and this and that and 50% or 10% or 75% and all of that. So a lot of that we pushed to the rules and regulations as long as it was an issue that was not going to affect the functioning of the program. So none of that is hard-coded. That is up for discussion at this point, because again, we did not want something that granular in sort of enshrined in the Constitution.
Thank you. And a couple exciting updates. We have Chris coming in for $250. Thank you so much, Chris. Sal Pace has donated several $100s as well. Very much appreciated. A lot of good questions coming in here. We have Leo's question. So some of us are familiar that have followed marijuana policy for a long time with the fact that the University of Mississippi is one of the few places that has been cultivating medical marijuana via the federal IND program, which I think is shut down for decades. So is there a tie between this initiative and the federal Ole Miss program, or how does that look?
Yeah, good question. So Ole Miss, effectively, they are under contract with NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Abuse. Interesting name. They assume it's drug abuse, of course, rather than valuable use. So they have been contracted to grow and test medical marijuana since 1968. And it is in Mississippi, but because it is under federal contract, it's effectively a federally controlled island within the state of Mississippi, which means Ole Miss could certainly serve in a testing capacity. There's a lot of things they could do to interface with and benefit the program, but the medical marijuana that they actually have, that they grow, that they test, et cetera, that cannot be used in the Mississippi medical marijuana program directly, because that is effectively owned by the federal government for FDA approved tests. Now, what's interesting related to that is, people tell me now and then, they're like, I really feel like we need to spend some more time, we need to spend some more time researching this. Like, they're researching at Ole Miss, they just need a little more time. Well, it's been 52 years. I mean, 50, going back to my analogy, the last time the legislature did something like that, it took 28 years, to actually, implement whatever it was. in this case, it's like, well, what if 52 years, if you study something for 52 years, how much more time do you really need in order to feel like you've adequately studied it? Is that another 8 years? Is that another 50 years? Like, is this, and we're not running medical marijuana 2100, right? We are running medical marijuana 2020 because 52 years is long enough. And we have studied it enough to know, and the people at Ole Miss will be the first to say, there is absolute medical value of putting this in the hands of patients. If we know that, and we do, now is the time to do that. So Jamie and I went up and visited with the whole group there. We toured their facilities, all as part of the initiative process back, I think, 2018. So back at the very beginning, one of the very first things we did was tour that facility, understand their needs, understand how we could work together, and some things like that.
Extremely thoughtful. Yeah, an interesting historic reference there to Ole Miss. So I want to stay true to our word here. We said we would do 40 minutes, and we're right at 40 minutes. So I wanted to remind those viewing this that any donations that come in today, the link is here, but we're going to email everyone the link as well. Please share that with your friends. Any donations up to $5,000 will be matched by Vicente Sederberg as well as Canna advisors. So with that, I really wanted to thank our panelists, Matt Schweich, Jamie Grantham, and Representative Joel Bomgar, and Jay as well for his help today. So thanks so much, and let's all get out there and vote, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, everybody.